Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. We continue reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 33, Text 11. So, Shraddhat Svaitan Matamayam Justam Yad Brahmavadibihi Yenamam Abhayam Yaya Mrityum Richanti Atad Vidaha. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. My dear mother, those who are actually transcendentalists certainly follow my instructions as I have given them to you. You may rest assured that if you traverse this path of self-realization perfectly, surely you shall be freed from fearful material contamination and shall ultimately reach me. Mother, persons who are not conversant with this method of devotional service certainly cannot get out of the cycle of birth and death. Here Lord Kapila Dev is saying for certain, and anyone who's not engaged in devotional service cannot get out of the cycle of birth and death. Then what about taking the Gyan path or taking the yoga path? As we know, even if we take the process of Gyan or even if we take the process of yoga, we have to come to the point of bhakti. If we really want success in our Gyan or if we want success in our yoga, Ashtanga yoga, we have to come to the point of bhakti. Even Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita that Devi hi aisha gunamai mam maya daratyaya mam eva ye prapadyante mayam etam taranti te. Krishna says, those who surrender to me can very easily cross beyond this material nature, which comprises of three modes, which is very difficult to overcome. And here Lord Kapila Dev is saying the same thing. So this material world is fearful. Our material consciousness, we are always fearful. We are lamenting, we are hankering, we are fearful. And if we can change our consciousness to engaging in devotional service, the more we engage in devotional service, the closer we go to Krishna, the less fearful we become. Abhay Charanara Vinda. That is our dear Srila Prabhupada's name. Abhay Charanara Vindam. Fearless at the lotus feet of the Lord. We can also become fearless if we engage in devotional service. Material existence is full of anxiety and therefore it is fearful. One who gets out of this material existence automatically becomes free from all anxieties and fear. One who follows the path of devotional service, enunciated by Lord Kapila, is very easily liberated. So if we really are, we really care about ourselves, we really are concerned where we are going, we should take up this process of devotional service with great earnestness, with great determination, with patience. And then we can see that we can get out of the material world. Reading on. Maitreya Vacha iti pradarshya Bhagavan satim tam atmano gatim swamatra brahma vadinya kapilo anumato yayo. Sri Maitreya said, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Kapila, after instructing his beloved mother, took permission from her and left his home, his mission having been fulfilled. So the mission of the appearance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the form of Kapila was to distribute the transcendental knowledge of Sankhya philosophy, which is full of devotional service. So here, the reason why Lord Kapila Dev appeared, he wanted to distribute this knowledge of Sankhya philosophy. Krishna says that he comes to give us knowledge. He comes to establish the principles of religion. That's what Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. And this is what he's doing. Lord Kapila Dev, he came to give us this knowledge of Sankhya, transcendental devotional service. having imparted that knowledge to his mother and through his mother to the world. Kapiladev had no more need to stay at home, so he took permission from his mother and left. So because his mission was fulfilled, now his purpose was not only to give this knowledge to Devahuti, but through Devahuti for us. Similarly, Krishna, he gave the knowledge of Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna, but that knowledge is not only for Arjuna, it is meant for us also, each and every one of us. Similarly, this knowledge, Kapila Shiksha, is meant for each and every one of us. Apparently, he left home for spiritual realization, although he had nothing to realize spiritually, because he himself is the person to be spiritually realized. Therefore, this is an example set by the Supreme Personality of Godhead while acting like an ordinary human being, so that others might learn from him. He could, of course, have stayed with his mother, but he indicated that there was no need to stay with a family. It is best to remain alone as a brahmachari, sannyasi, or vanaprastha and cultivate Krishna consciousness throughout one's whole life. So Krishna, whenever he comes, he sets the example. He tells Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita that he has to set the example. Why? Because whatever the great people do, common man follows. We can see we are also like that. You know, we see, oh, somebody, some famous person is doing this and this, or even I should do it. So Krishna, he is the most famous. He's the highest authority. No one is a higher authority than Krishna. So he's showing by his example here that he's leaving his home apparently for self-realization. But he's God. He doesn't need to realize anything. But he's just setting the example that after a certain age, that you need to cultivate spiritual knowledge. Now, we, in this age of Kali, we don't need to leave home and go to the forest. It's not practical for us to live in the forest. What we can do is we can increase our spiritual activities, increase our hearing, increase our chanting. Those who are unable to remain alone are given license to live in household life with wife and children, not for sense gratification, but for cultivation of Krishna consciousness. So we continue reading. Sachapi tana yoktena yoga deshena yoga yog tasmin ashrama apide sarasvatya samahita. As instructed by her son, Devahuti also began to practice bhakti yoga in that very ashram. She practiced samadhi in the house of Kardama Muni, which was so beautifully decorated with flowers that it was considered the flower crown of the river Saraswati. Devahuti did not leave her house because it is never recommended for a woman to leave her home. She's dependent. The very example of Devahuti was that when she was not married, she was under the care of her father, Swayambhuva Manu, and then Swayambhuva Manu gave her to Kardama Muni in charity. She was under the care of her husband in her youth, and then her son Kapila Muni was born. As soon as her son grew up, her husband left home, and similarly the son, after discharging his duty towards his mother, also left. So this was in Vedic times. We can see now currently our society is very, very different. Vedic times, the woman was always first under the protection of the father, then the protection of the son, then protection of the husband, and then the protection of the son, as we see in the life of Devahuti. She was the daughter of Swayambhuva Manu, then she got married to Kardama Muni, then Kardama Muni left home, but he gave her under the care of Lord Kapiladev. Of course, eventually Lord Kapiladev also left home. But we can see in modern times, we don't follow the Vedic system anymore. You know, the society is completely different. We women, we say we want freedom. And so maybe many of the young women would not would have their own thoughts or own views about this, but this is anyway what was in the Vedic time. So Devahuti could have left home, but she did not. Rather, she remained at home and began to practice Bhakti Yoga as it was instructed by her great son, Kapila Muni. And because of her practice of Bhakti Yoga, the entire home became just like a flower crown on the river Saraswati. So Kardama Muni's ashram was on the banks of the river Saraswati, and Devahuti continued to live there. I don't know if any of you want to discuss this point about the woman being at home or leaving home. Does anyone want to speak anything about it? If no, then we continue reading. Anyway, the more important point is to understand we are all spirit souls. So just the bodies that we are in, man or woman. Reading on. Abhikshnava gaha kapishan jati lan kutila lakan atmanam chokra tapasa biprati chirinam sharam. She began to bathe 3 times daily, and thus her curling black hair gradually became gray. Due to austerity, her body gradually became thin, and she wore old garments. It is a practice of the yogi, brahmachari, vanaprasth, and sannyasi to bathe at least 3 times daily, early in the morning, during noontime, and in the evening. So many devotees follow this. 3 times bathing, some bathe twice, at least once a day need to bathe. These principles are strictly followed even by some grahastas, especially brahmanas, who are elevated in spiritual consciousness. Devahuti was a king's daughter and almost a king's wife also. Although Kardama Muni was not a king, by his yogic mystic power, he accommodated Devahuti very comfortably in a nice palace with maidservants and all opulence. So we read how Kardama Muni, he created this flying palace for Devahuti, and which could go in any part of the universe, any planet of the universe, and she had thousands and thousands of maidservants taking care of her. So, but since she had learned austerity, even in the presence of her husband, there was no difficulty for her to be austere. So we read that she was the daughter of the emperor. You know, the daughter of the emperor, we can imagine that how much luxury she must be having. And yet she gave up all that, and she was living in a small ashram on the banks of the river Saraswati with Kardama Muni, and she was serving him. She didn't have any servants. She was doing all the cooking and cleaning herself, and she was taking care of Kardama Muni's needs so properly that she was even neglecting her own physical body. So still because her body, so this was when her husband was there. So she was used to austerity. Then, of course, for a certain time, she had a lot of enjoyment, a lot of material opulence. But again, now again, she's taking up this austerity. Still, because her body underwent severe austerity after the departure of her husband and son, she became thin. To be too fat is not very good for spiritually advanced life. Rather, one should reduce, because if one becomes fat, it is an impediment to progress in spiritual understanding. One should be careful not to eat too much, sleep too much, or remain in a comfortable position. Voluntarily accepting some penances and difficulties, one should take less food and less sleep. These are the procedures for practicing any kind of yoga, whether Bhakti Yoga, Gyan Yoga, or Hatha Yoga. So how could we misuse hearing this, that one should take less food and less sleep? We could misuse it by not understanding what is the need of our body. You know, because we need to take whatever amount of food or amount of sleep that we need. What we do is sometimes we overdo it. We take sleep, which is not needed, or we take food, which is not needed. But after hearing this, we may make a mistake of cutting down even what we need. So that's a balance that we need to understand our own self. So, because spiritual life is all about trying to balance, a nice balance. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, don't eat too much, don't eat too less, don't sleep too much, don't sleep too less. So a balance, the same point is being repeated here. Praja and austerity, we don't need to artificially take up too much austerity. Prabhupada would say, just trying to be Krishna conscious, following the 4 regulative principles, having Krishna prasadam, doing our chanting, doing the deity worship is austerity also, So austerity in Krishna consciousness. We don't need to do some extra austerity. Trying to be Krishna conscious, that is an austerity, and we should try that austerity, that penance for the pleasure of Krishna. Prajapate kardamasya tapo yoga vijrimbitam swaghasthyam anaupamyam parthayam vemanikerapi. The home and household paraphernalia of Kardama, who was one of the Prajapatis, was developed in such a way by dint of his mystic powers of austerity and yoga that his opulence was sometimes envied by those who travel in outer space in airplanes. The statement in this verse that Kardama Muni's household affairs were envied even by persons who travel in outer space refers to the denizens of heaven. So that means the inhabitants, the people who are living in the heavenly planets, they are getting envious of Kardama Muni's home, of where Devahuti is living, because it was so opulent. Their airships are not like those we have invented in the modern age, which fly only from one country to another. Their airplanes were capable of going from one planet to another. There are many such statements in the Srimad Bhagavatam from which we can understand that there were facilities to travel from one planet to another, especially in the higher planetary system. And who can say that they are not still traveling? So if we think that interplanetary travel is not possible, why? Because I haven't seen it, or because the human beings on this earth don't have it. But it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It does exist. The higher planets have entities with higher intelligence, with more opulence, and they have more beautiful aeroplanes. Our aeroplanes are made of iron. They are aeroplanes made of gold, and it can go at will. They don't have to fill petrol or cause pollution. It just goes at will, environment friendly. The speed of our airplanes and space vehicles is very limited, but as we have already studied, Kardama Muni traveled in outer space in an airplane, which was like a city, and he journeyed to see all the different heavenly planets. That was not an ordinary airplane, nor was it ordinary space travel. Because Kardama Muni was such a powerful mystic yogi, his opulence was envied by the denizens of heaven. So Kardama Muni is one example that he had this beautiful airplane. He made it like a city, flying city. It's not that others didn't. Ravan also had. Ravan had like a huge flying city. A very beautiful flying city also. And then there are many, many instances in history where so many yogis could just have this kind of interplanetary system, interplanetary travel. So it doesn't mean that because of our modern lives, we don't see something, it was not possible, or that it's not happening right now, as Prabhupada is saying. Who can say that they are not still traveling? If we say that, no, it's not possible because I don't know it, then we are limiting ourselves. We are limiting our consciousness to very small, to only what is, oh, this is my experience, and so that's the only truth. Payafena nibashaya danta rukma parichadaha asanani cha hemani shushparshas cha. The opulence of the household of Kardama Muni is described here in the bed sheets and mattresses were all as white as the foam of milk. The chairs and benches were made of ivory and were covered by cloths of lace with golden filigree. And the couches were made of gold and had very soft pillows. That's very opulent. Very, very opulent compared to modern standards. This is like 100 star or even more than that. Swachasvatika kudyeshu mahamarakateshu cha ratna pradipa abhanti lana ratna samyutaha. The walls of the house were made of first-class marble, decorated with valuable jewels. There was no need of light, for the household was illuminated by the rays of these jewels. The female members of the household were all amply decorated with jewelry. It is understood from this statement that the opulences of household life are exhibited in valuable jewels, ivory, first-class marble, and furniture made of gold and jewels. So furniture of gold and jewels. Here now, if we compare what our furniture is right now, but in earlier days, because we say, no, now we have progressed so much and humanity is at the best right now. We have the highest quality of living. But here we can see that in Vedic times, there was a lot of opulence. The clothes are also mentioned as being decorated with golden filigree. Everything actually had some value. It was not like the furniture of the present day, which is cast in valueless plastic or base metal. The way of Vedic civilization is that whatever was used in household affairs had to be valuable. Why? In case of need, such items of value could be exchanged immediately. So everything was valuable. Just in case somebody needed something, the barter system was there, of course, so that they could exchange it, their needs could be met. Now we buy things and we throw them because nobody wants it. We have to pay money for people to take away the things. Thus, one's broken and unwanted furniture and paraphernalia would never be without value. This system is still followed by Indians in household affairs. So it was. Now I don't know, current India, how is it? At least when I was small, it was to a great degree. Now I'm not sure. They keep metal utensils and golden ornaments or silver plates and valuable silk garments with gold embroidery. And in case of need, they can have some money in exchange immediately. There are exchanges for the money lenders and the householders. So this is the reason that they would do it, just in case they needed the money in emergency. Did anyone want to add anything or comment?
But she was doing the austerity, so still being a householder, she could do all that, right?
Yes, yes, she did not leave her house. She
No,
did
but
not
then
leave.
even within the house, like, she would be using all that. So that is okay. All the
Yes,
services, all the products.
yes, yes,
Okay.
yes, yes. Because we have to understand, like we see the example of, with who's that? The devotee in Caitaniya Caritamta, that he was very opulent, having opulent clothes, sitting in a jula, having servants and having golden cups and everything. But he was a pure devotee of the Lord. So it's the intention that is important.
Okay.
And she being a woman, in those days, women never would leave the house. And she had an opulent home. So she continued to stay there.
Yeah, the same is like how Krishna, right? When he was in Dwarka, his wives, they all had their own palaces and right, huge palaces, and they had all their jewelry, right?
Yes, that's right. They had a lot of opulence.
That's
Yeah. Okay. We'll stop here for today. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Bhaktavinda ki jai. Hare Krishna. Thank you so much
Hare Krishna.
for listening and joining in today. Hari Bol.